So my name is Jaap. I'm the head of product here at AppFollow. Today I'm talking with Jeffery King from Grindr, and our talk will focus about the power of user feedback. And this is definitely a topic close to my heart. In my role, both as a product manager and a product designer, product feedback, customer feedback is a big part and plays a big role. And I think it's essential to involve customers in the full product development process to make sure we achieve the most successful outcomes. And in the product world, user feedback can have many different forms, like surveys and interviews and doing usability testing. And I think it helps our teams to stay humble and to really understand that maybe your first idea might not be the best one, and it's better to test early and check these things, and to practice a habit of building something, measuring it, and learning and iterate this way to the right solution. And hopefully then finally, this will lead, of course, to customer satisfaction, and you will see it appear right in front of your eyes. And these are, of course, examples from product teams. And I'm very excited to talk with Jeffery more from the customer experience, customer success side, and where we'll see where these examples are very actively initiated user feedback. And Jeffery will talk a bit about more passive forms. And without further ado, Jeffery, let's kick it off. Can you talk a bit about yourself, explain your role at Grindr?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. So I am the community advocate at Grindr, and my previous work experience was all in sort of recruitment and training and customer service. I made that jump probably about 5 years ago. But every role that I've done, has been, about feedback and providing a service that people want to continue to use. So I'm getting to use it in a different way, but a really exciting and interesting way at Grindr. And so my role, sort of normally entails looking at feedback. So I spend a lot of time with some of our feedback channels, listening and talking to users and hearing what their pain points are, what they really love and don't want us to change, and then sort of working on sometimes an individual level to help them solve a specific problem. But then I'm also looking at trends. So if a bunch of people are saying sort of similar things, that's something that's good for us to know, so we can hopefully provide them with a solution that works for everybody.
Yeah, thanks for a great intro. And I guess most of us are familiar with the Grindr app, but can you talk a bit about some statistics to get an idea of the volume of reviews and feedback you get in?
Yeah, so with our app reviews, we get somewhere between 150 to 200 a day. And I read every single one, which is awesome because it really helps give me sort of at least a baseline of what are people talking about, what have they been talking about, and how that changes, sometimes in slight ways, but sometimes in big, meaningful ways. I also look at Reddit. So we have a pretty active, Reddit, where people talk a lot about not only just sort of, products or things on the app, but also their experiences, whether they're positive, which, most of the time people are having a positive experience, but also sometimes, they may not be. And, it's good for us to hear those stories as well, because that's where a lot of the real improvement happens. And, we use a tool called User Voice, where people can pitch ideas that they think would really help them find whatever connections they're looking for. And so we get, we have, I think, somewhere over, 1,500 ideas, in there, over sort of the years that we've had that program. And so it's been fascinating to hear all of the different flavors of feedback, the good, the bad, the inquisitive, the funny, all of it is good.
Yeah, it's very familiar, and we also at AppFollow collect feedback, and it's great to hear what people think we could improve, and the work is never done. Like, it's an endless list, and that's a great way to make sure you also work on the most important things.
As soon as you solve one thing, then it just goes to whatever number 2 was. So you're never done.
You mentioned a little bit, but can you explain further, like, the reasons for collecting feedback, and definitely also like prioritizing to do something with this?
Yeah, I think it's important simply because it's good to hear that you're great and wonderful and doing amazing things, but that's usually not how you improve. You normally improve by hearing maybe the things that people aren't as happy with. And so, as I said, throughout my career, collecting feedback and making sure people are okay and are feeling fulfilled by whatever the experience is super important. So as a recruiter, when I was servicing clients or the people I was interviewing, we asked for feedback from both of them because it was important to make sure that that process is as strong as it could be. And it's the same with working for a company like Grindr. Of course, we want the good. We want to know the things that people love, but even more important are the things that people, don't like, or maybe didn't land as well, or maybe people are unclear about, because that shows us, hey, maybe we can do a little bit better, or, oh, people took that in a way that we didn't intend. We need to clarify that. Maybe we could have been clearer in, how we actually, brought that to life. So, I think it's just important for feedback. It's how you get better. It's how you improve. It's how you create something that people want to continue to engage with.
Yeah, and you mentioned you cover multiple sources. Do you see different type of feedback across those sources, and which main categories do you kind of like recognize?
We do see, sort of differences amongst the feedback. Obviously, the cases where people are talking about the same thing across multiple platforms, those are the easy ones, right? Because, okay, this is a thing, whether it's positive or constructive, that people really care about and are passionate about. So those things are, the easy ones, because you're like, okay, people are really, really onto this one. But it's those differences that sometimes can make this process a little bit challenging. I think that is rewarding to kind of figure it out and get into the weeds and really determine what is going on and what are people trying to solve. But in app reviews, I think we tend to get a lot of what I would call maybe extremes, just because we're usually catching people whilst they're using, the platform. And so we're getting people who are like very happy because, they've made a great connection. They're feeling really good. Or, we might be getting people who might be very frustrated in the moment. So it's a lot of, sort of maybe unfiltered, I think, feedback. Where people are either really happy or really unhappy when we are hearing from them. I think on Reddit, usually it's longer because of the format. People, have time to, type out their thoughts and their feelings. And then people get to comment on them in real time. So I think also it's interesting to listen to the discussion. And, people sometimes can see, oh, maybe the way that I'm approaching this isn't the only way to think about it, because someone else has a completely different opinion on that product or that experience. And I think that's important for, people to see that not everybody thinks of, what makes a good product in the same way. And then with things like, user voice or, other parts of the business, I'm not the only person, obviously, who looks at feedback. People, usually with user voice, it's a lot more interactive because people are pitching an idea that they think is great. And people are either like, yeah, I want that too. Or they're like, nah, I don't think so. So there's a lot more sort of a natural back and forth as people try and convince each other that their ideas should be the next one that we adopt.
Yeah, thanks for the great overview. And you mentioned in the beginning that you actually read all those individual reviews. And what's the strategy here? So at least that's step one. From there, like responding or analyzing, like how do you take in all this feedback and what to do with it?
Yeah, I think my first thought with, app reviews is, obviously we have way more customers than leave us an app review. So I think it's putting it in the correct context that, sometimes app reviews may or may not be representative of like our entire user base. But what I do think app reviews are really, really strong at is sentiment. And when that sentiment changes. So, if oh, 5% of people always write in about this, but hey, over the last month, that's grown to 10% or 15%. That's where you can start to see, hey, there's a change here. And, figuring out why that change might be happening, or have we done something on our end that has facilitated people to talk more about that topic, is to me like the important part. That's the really interesting, fascinating. Why has this changed? Again, is it something random, or is it purposeful? Is this top of mind for people for a particular reason? And so it's starting with that of kind of, okay, have we made a change that has facilitated that? If not, what's going on maybe in sort of the general dating world that might make people feel like that this is much more of an important topic. And then it's about sort of, is anybody else seeing it, is the way that I approach it. So, I might run it by my actual customer experience team. Hey, are they seeing it in support tickets? Are we seeing it in trust and safety? Are we seeing it in content moderation, depending on what it is? And then also going to the wider business, our user research team, our product team, are they hearing anything similar to this? And that's determining, how big of an issue is this? And that sort of determines, how much time we spend on it. Is this something that maybe is only affecting a small group of people? It's still relevant, obviously, but, it determines how much time we spend on it and engage with it.
Yeah, and I think here you can really see that the power of user feedback and how many other teams and people it actually impacts, and where it starts with
Yeah.
you. But yeah, you can empower it further within the organization. And great for sharing some very tactful examples. And to go even more specific, it would be great if you can example some memorable user feedback that you've received that you feel like is interesting to share.
Yeah, I think because Grindr is a dating app for queer people, the feedback where people feel like, wow, maybe they live in a country where it's not okay for them to be queer, and the fact that they might find some solace or joy from our platform is everything, because not all queer people live in a place where they can be who they are. And regardless of how we identify, most of us want love in some form or connection in some form. And so that those pieces of feedback where people are saying, thank you for the platform, thank you for, creating something where I can connect, is great. I think also the opposite is also important too, when people maybe feel like, hey, I really, really wish the platform had this. This would help someone like me be able to better connect with people. That also rings true to me. Anytime where people are vulnerable, because in the world, I think we sometimes like to pretend that everything's okay. And so the feedback that I think affects me the most is when people are really vulnerable and they're really just wanting to connect with people the way that we all do, because it's very human to want, to have joy and happiness and experience these things. And so those are the pieces of feedback that always really get to me are, hey, thank you so much for what you guys are doing, because it's so many people doing a lot of hard work and thinking about how our users are going to be impacted, but also the ones where we might be able to do better for a certain group of people.
Yeah, and it's great to see that these people feel comfortable enough and that it's meaningful enough for them to also share in a public setting, right? Both app reviews and Reddit are places where the whole world can read along, and of course, also are then very important to listen carefully to. So some days you might get loads of feedback, and you even want to read everything maybe one by one, but I guess you also have to prioritize what deserves your attention. Can you talk a bit about how you address this?
Yeah. As I said at the beginning, I do deal with sort of people individually. So if a user has an individual problem that maybe they felt hasn't been solved or looked at in a fair manner, I would take, that on and, sort of determine like, hey, maybe this person just needed the instructions explained to them a little bit more clearly, or hey, maybe we do need to take another look at this to make sure that we made the right decision. But most of my job is sort of those bigger trends. What is the user base maybe generally talking about? How are they feeling? Is there something perhaps that we missed? So, I'm sort of looking at that as like a main point. Is there something that has actively changed that has made people feel very strongly about something? And then I look at it in different ways. So, is this feedback happening in different places. Are people talking about the same thing, but maybe they're talking about it in a way that is different? Because obviously we have people from all over the world, different cultures, different beliefs, different values. And so sometimes people are talking about the same thing, but in different ways. And so it's kind of like, what is the base level need that we're trying to solve for? And that kind of, how crucial is that to the functioning of the app? We also have, like a product roadmap, and the CX team is obviously we speak to users, but our function is to make sure that we are providing that feedback to the company in a way that helps, product and engineers and everybody else, one, just, get an understanding of what our users feel that they want and need, but also help us create a better product. So it's also that of making sure that information gets back to the right people, and then having that conversation. I know, some of the things that they're thinking about. And so if I see, pieces of feedback that relate to that, it's kind of, okay, wow, this is something that might be of interest to you as you're thinking about how to, make this new feature or this new tool in a way that's going to gel with our users.
Yeah, and does it work the other way around sometimes as well, where maybe they approach you like, hey, you're in touch with our community, can you maybe specifically look out for certain feedback or engage with the community to ask like what they think about a certain topic?
Absolutely. So, our, product team and the product managers, regularly will come to sort of the CX team and say, hey, we're thinking about this. Do you have any feedback from users that have talked about this? Sometimes it's just, let's just collect some feedback. Sometimes it's, we're really interested in talking to some users who maybe have had this experience or who are really passionate about this idea. We'd love to, sort of pick their brains and get like maybe an early, some early ideas about how we are thinking about implementing, this new change or this new feature. And we also release a voice of the customer report. So, we both, as a CX team, look at that as, hey, we're going to tell you both what people were talking about, but also we're going to hit on some things that we know the company is thinking about, as a way to say, hey, we've got more information whenever you're ready to hear it. So let us know, and we're happy to provide that.
Yeah, I can imagine it must be super helpful for the whole company and interesting to see how you distill all that feedback into a report with the most actionable insights. And great to hear examples of where you have both this passive feedback, but also active feedback for specific cases when the product team knows what they want to know a little more about. Reaching towards some of the final question, it's kind of like encompassing like what does give you the most joy of your job and working with customers and user feedback in general? I think we touched upon it, but maybe as a closing note, would be great to hear you sum it up.
I love my job. I love that I work for a company that feels it's really important to know what their users are saying. Again, especially working for a site that works or tries to connect marginalized people like queer people who haven't always had their wants and needs and thoughts centered, to literally be hired to tell us what they're saying and how they're saying it and when it changes so that we can better service them and help them connect and meet people and find the connections that they want, brings me so much joy, because that's, again, a very human thing. That's ultimately what everybody wants, is to be heard and to have their opinions feel valued. And that I work for a company that would pay me to do that is great. And I love people. I find people so interesting and complex and complicated and infuriating, but also great and fun and full of joy. And it's nice to be able to see all of that feedback that makes us human, both like I said, the positive and the constructive. All of it is really important because all of those things make us who we are.
Thanks. I love it. I see how you talk about it with so much passion. Must give you joy to perform this job on a daily basis, and also the community must somehow perceive it, even though it's sometimes just text and words being exchanged.
Yeah.
I think it's great that you're behind it. Yeah, I'm going to switch if there's any questions that have come in. I think already from the registration forms, there was some that were relevant for our conversation. So I'll maybe pass those on to you. How do you connect the user feedback to the actual product? So I guess this is working together with the product team and really translating like specific maybe requests or things that don't work. Yeah, can you talk a bit about this?
Yeah, I think for me, it's sort of twofold. It's both sort of, hey, people seem to be talking about this issue or situation, and maybe it's not something that's been on our radar. And so it's figuring out a way. Obviously, since I read every app review, I'm constantly looking at feedback, and other people, are not necessarily looking at this, at least in the way that I am. And so it's, how do you um, take this feedback and put it in a way that people understand it? And I think it's definitely something that I've gotten better at. And so it's kind of like, here is, I feel like when you figure out what the base level need is that people are trying to solve, that's a good start, because it means that I've done enough talking to people or looking at feedback that I understand what people are trying to solve. I think it's also like personally getting out of your own way. There are plenty of times that I bring up situations or topics that I personally don't think are an issue, but they are to maybe a certain percentage of our users or to our user base. And it's important to be able to separate what I personally think versus, well, this is what people are telling us. And I think it's very important sometimes for organizations to remember that sometimes your customer base might be telling you something you may not want to hear. And that's still important. It's still important to know how people process things and how they think about things and what things are important to them. Because the goal is to know your customer base so that you can hopefully provide them with the tools that they have to solve those base level needs. But it's also just talking to people. It's talking to other people and not just assuming that the feedback as I see is the whole picture. It's a piece of the puzzle, but I really need to talk to my other teammates who might be seeing something totally different or come at this with a totally different perspective. And then it's the rest of the business. Is there something that I'm missing? Which usually is yes. Usually there's other feedback that I may not also have. And so it's important to share and be open to get at what can we do then? Now that we know what the base level issue is, and we know that it's actually a thing because we're seeing feedback in multiple places. Now, how do we solve that? And what is the best way to go about this?
Yeah, I think like one method that you mentioned, the voice of the customer report, I think is a great way as well. How you translate some of the feedback and make essentially also summarize it, right? To make sure that it has an impact to the product team. And this is also something we use at AppFollow every quarter when we kind of review what to do next and ask both from our sales teams and customer support teams to see like what was the voice of the customer last quarter, what's most top of mind, what should we do next in product. Yeah, so jumping on to another question from the chat. How much do you care about the app rating itself? So we talked a lot about the reviews. Is this an important KPI for you, or do you more pay attention to the content of the reviews?
No, it is important. I don't want to speak for the whole. It is important to me, and it's something that we do watch because again, I think app reviews are very good at sentiment and getting an idea of, okay, if it's dropped a little bit, what's happened? And sometimes going in, hey, maybe we had a rough period with outages or things like that, or what have you. It happens in tech sometimes, but it's something we pay attention to. And I think that in the past, whenever there's been changes to that rating, whether it's been in a positive direction or not so positive direction, we've been able to figure out, hey, this is maybe the situation and the topic that has caused the most frustration for our user base, or that has made them really, really happy. They've really engaged with, this new product or this new feature. And again, that sort of change towards, hey, there is a sentiment change here, positive or not so positive. And so I think being able to focus on that sometimes can give you a quick win in terms of, okay, we know that this is a real, that people not only took the time to tell us about it, but that it's also in the rating. We also look at the review rating, which obviously can be different, and is usually lower because, people, are usually, they don't always unfortunately tell us when they're super happy, but they will tell us when they're not. But, again, overall, that's how we improve, is mostly through that feedback of, I'm mad that you did this, or why did you do this, or I really want to this instead. That is where we really get better and know what people think.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think also we see some of our customers focus on these reviews that maybe have the low rating and try to turn it around, right? Like make this bad experience and turn it around, make the customer happy, and maybe also the rating will change as a result. Jeffrey, thanks a lot for your time. This was great listening to you. Thanks for answering all the questions, and we'll jump on to the next one.